The retrofitted transport shuddered, a jarring symphony of groans and hisses as it sliced through the ochre-tinged atmosphere of Ethel. Captain Kalen Vance, a man whose weariness was etched into the lines around his eyes as deeply as the scars on his functional, graphite-black combat armor, peered through the grimy viewport. Below, the landscape of Ethel unfurled, a desolate expanse of rust-colored dunes and jagged, wind-scoured canyons, all bathed in the eerie, perpetual twilight cast by its twin, diminutive moons. Another forgotten rock at the galaxy's edge. Another mess to clean up. Just how many more of these pacification tours could one man endure before he became as barren as the worlds he was sent to tame? The shuttle slammed onto the ferrocrete landing pad with a final, bone-jarring thud. The ramp lowered, blasting the recycled air of the transport with Ethel's thin, metallic-smelling atmosphere. Waiting for him was a portly man, his colonial administrator uniform already dark with nervous sweat despite the planet's chill. Captain Vance. Thank the void you're here. The administrator, a man named Boren, chirped, his voice a little too high. The situation with the native, hostiles, it's escalated. Beyond our local capabilities, you understand. Kalen just grunted, his gaze sweeping over the dilapidated settlement that huddled in the shadow of a colossal, half-buried alien derelict, a relic from some long-dead civilization, now probably picked clean. Ramshackle prefabs, patched with scavenged metal and hope, leaned against each other for support. That's why Command sent me, Administrator Boren, Kalen said, his voice a gravelly baritone that brooked no argument. Full briefing. Access to all security feeds. Now. His internal monologue was less polite, another uprising, another batch of ill-equipped colonists, another damned headache. He felt the weight of eyes on him as they trudged through the dusty main thoroughfare. Colonists, a motley collection of humans and a few other hardy, down-on-their-luck species, watched from shadowed doorways, their faces a stark canvas of fear and a desperate, almost painful flicker of hope. He was used to it. The Interstellar Peacekeeping Corps didn't deploy someone with his reputation, unless things had truly gone to the ninth hell. The colony headquarters was a squat, bunker-like structure, surprisingly robust compared to the surrounding shantytown. Inside, a group of anxious-looking officials were gathered around a flickering holographic display of the surrounding Badlands. Red icons pulsed ominously over key routes. The Athelian rebels have been hitting our supply convoys hard, Captain, the security chief, a grim-faced woman with a cybernetic eye, explained without preamble. We've lost 3 heavy crawlers this past rotation alone. Vital supplies. Kalen studied the map, his mind already cataloging choke points, ambush sites, potential rebel strongholds. Show me the attack vectors. And their presumed withdrawal routes. As they delved into the grim logistics of counterinsurgency, Kalen felt it, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. A gaze. Intense. Unwavering. He turned, slowly. Standing in the doorway, partially obscured by the deep shadows, was a young Athelian girl. She couldn't have been more than 16, perhaps 17 in Terran equivalent years, though Athelian aging was a different beast altogether. Her hair, the color of spun moonlight, cascaded down her back, a stark contrast to her skin, which was a luminous, almost iridescent teal. But it was her eyes that snared his attention, large, expressive orbs the color of a nebula, fixed on him with an unnerving, unabashed fascination. What was it with these fringe worlds and their wide-eyed natives? Who's the child? Kalen's voice cut through the briefing, sharper than intended. Administrator Boren glanced over, a flush rising on his already florid face. Ah, that's Lyra, Captain. Just one of the locals. Harmless, really. A bit persistent. She has this fascination with off-worlders. Especially humans in uniform. He offered a weak, apologetic smile. As if summoned, Lyra stepped fully into the light, her simple, homespun tunic swishing around her slender legs. She moved with a grace that seemed out of place in the rough-hewn settlement. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was melodic, with a curious, lilting accent he couldn't quite place. "You are Captain Kalen Vance," she stated, not asked. Her gaze, still locked on him, was disconcertingly direct. "I have heard the star tales. Is it true? Did you truly face down the Cthar overlords single-handedly during the Orion Nebula sieges?" A muscle twitched in Kalen's jaw. Legends. Always these damned legends painting him as some kind of mythical hero instead of a soldier doing a dirty job. "You shouldn't believe everything you hear, kid," he said, his tone flat, dismissing the awe in her voice, the light in her eyes. He turned back to the holographic map, the red icons of the insurgency far more pressing. The girl, Lyra, bristled. Her chin, delicate but firm, lifted. "I am not a kid," she retorted, her voice losing some of its melody, gaining a spark of fire. "I am 17 cycles old." Kalen barely spared her a glance. "Still a kid in my book." He jabbed a finger at a sector on the map. "Concentrate forces here. I want patrols doubled. Run along now, girl. The adults have work to do." He saw the flicker of hurt in those nebula eyes, a brief dimming of their light. But then, something else replaced it. A glint. Hard. Defiant. It was there and gone in an instant, but Kalen, a man trained to notice such minutiae, filed it away. Another complication. He didn't need complications. He needed this planet pacified, yesterday. Lyra didn't run along. For the next several days, as Kalen established a tighter security perimeter and began drilling the local militia into something resembling a fighting force, she was an unwanted, unervingly silent shadow. She'd appear at the edge of the training grounds, watching his every move. She'd be there when he inspected the aging perimeter defenses, peppering him with questions about starships, about Earth, about the faded scars that crisscrossed his arms and the one that bisected his left eyebrow. "Were you scared, Captain Vance? During the sieges?" she'd ask. Or, "What does rain feel like on a world with actual oceans?" His patience, already worn thin by the stubborn rebels and the colonists' incompetence, began to fray. "Love is a luxury soldiers can't afford, kid," he'd snorted once when she'd asked, with startling innocence, if he'd ever been in love. She'd looked genuinely sad at that. "Everyone deserves love, Captain. What would a child like her know about it?" The breaking point came on the 8th day. Kalen was prepping a small, heavily armed reconnaissance team for a deep sortie into contested territory, a nest of rebel activity they needed to pinpoint. Lyra appeared at his elbow, dressed in a bizarre, mismatched collection of scavenged protective padding over her simple tunic. A dented plasteel shoulder guard here, a strip of hardened leather there. She even clutched a sharpened metal stake. "I am coming with you," she announced, her young face set with a resolve that was almost comical, if it weren't so irritatingly persistent. Kalen stared at her, then let out a harsh laugh. "Like the ninth hell you are. I can help," she insisted, her voice earnest. "I know these canyons better than any of your off-worlder scouts. I can track, I can find water. This isn't a game, Lyra." He finally snapped, his patience utterly exhausted. He spun on her, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. People die out there. Real people. They bleed. They scream. It's not some heroic ballad they'll sing about you. Her composure wavered, just for a second. A tremor in her voice. I am not afraid. He grabbed her by her thin shoulders, perhaps a little rougher than he intended, forcing her to meet his gaze. His eyes were like chips of ice. Listen to me, and listen well. You are a child. Playing at being a soldier. This isn't some romantic adventure you've cooked up in your head. This is war. It's ugly, and it's brutal, and there is nothing glorious about it. Tears welled in her nebula eyes, but she didn't break his gaze. A single tear traced a path down her teal cheek. I just want to be near you, she whispered, the defiance momentarily lost. For Void's sake. Kalen released her, running a hand through his cropped hair in exasperation. You're too young for this. For any of this. He sighed, a sound like grinding gears. Come back when you've grown up, Lyra. Then we'll talk. The words, meant to be a final, unanswerable dismissal, hit her like a physical blow. She stepped back, the light in her eyes dimming completely, replaced by a profound, shattering hurt. Without another word, she turned and fled, her silver hair streaming behind her like the tail of a dying comet. Kalen watched her go, a sudden, unexpected pang of something, guilt, gnawing at him. He ruthlessly pushed it aside. He had a mission to complete. Rebels to neutralize. He couldn't afford distractions, especially not in the form of a lovesick alien teenager. As he boarded the heavily armored transport with his team, he told himself it was for the best. She'd find some local boy her own age, forget all about the gruff off-worlder captain. In a few months, he'd be gone from this dusty, insignificant planet, on to the next crisis, the next battlefield. He never expected to see Lyra, the girl from Ethel, ever again. He certainly never imagined what form that meeting would take, or how much one girl's promise to herself could change the fate of worlds, including his own. He never expected to see Lyra, the girl from Ethel, ever again. He certainly never imagined what form that meeting would take, or how much one girl's promise to herself could change the fate of worlds, including his own. His final words to her, "Come back when you've grown up, Lyra. Then we'll talk," had been a casual, almost cruel dismissal, quickly forgotten as he moved on to the next galactic hotspot, the next insurgency. 5 years. Enough time for a girl to become a ghost, or a legend. Or perhaps, something far more dangerous. Captain Kalen Dance, 5 years older, a constellation of new scars mapping fresh campaigns across his already weathered face, stood on the command deck of the Interstellar Peacekeeping Corps flagship, the Dauntless. The massive vessel sliced through the void, its destination a grimly familiar one, Ethel. That dusty, twin-mooned rock he tried to pacify half a decade ago was now, according to the urgent dispatches, tearing itself apart in a full-blown civil war. High Command, in its infinite wisdom, had decided Kalen's prior experience with the Athelian insurgency made him the ideal candidate to lead this new, far larger peacekeeping force. Experience. Right. What did they call a mission where you quelled the flames in one sector only to have the whole damned forest catch fire later? The planet Ethel swelled in the main view screen, no longer just a forgotten speck but a seething cauldron of conflict. He remembered his last tour clearly, a string of brutal skirmishes, the grim satisfaction of neutralizing the immediate militant threat, the underlying tensions of a native population pushed too far by colonial expansion. Obviously, those tensions hadn't just festered in his absence, they'd exploded. And what of that girl? The silver-haired one with the luminous teal skin and those unusual eyes. Lyra. He'd barely given her a second thought after leaving Ethel. Probably married off to some local artisan or farmer by now, he mused dismissively, likely with a brood of teal-skinned children clinging to her tunic. The thought, unbidden, brought an unexpected, almost imperceptible twinge. Not regret, he quickly corrected himself. He'd done the right thing pushing her away. She'd been a child with a dangerous crush on a uniform, nothing more. Still, was it possible she even remembered him, the gruff off-worlder captain? Entering Ethel's orbit in 5 minutes, Captain, his navigation officer, a young, eager lieutenant named Ryla, reported from her console. Her voice was crisp, professional. A stark contrast to the chaos they were about to descend into. Acknowledged, Lieutenant, Kalen replied, his gaze fixed on the swirling ochre clouds that masked much of Ethel's surface. Standard peacekeeping protocols on approach. I want sensor sweeps for any unusual energy signatures. This isn't just a local spat anymore. The landing was surprisingly smooth, the Dauntless settling onto a newly expanded and heavily fortified starport, a far cry from the dusty, makeshift pad he remembered. Barely had his boots touched the ferrocrete when an aide materialized, saluting sharply. Captain Vance, sir. Colonial Governor Rostova requests your immediate presence at an emergency council meeting. A transport is waiting. So much for easing back into things. The ride to the colonial headquarters was a grim eye-opener. What had once been a struggling, ramshackle settlement clinging to life was now a sprawling, fortified city, albeit one bearing the fresh scars of recent conflict. Checkpoints bristled with energy weapons, and the air thrummed with the passage of military shuttles. The original, squat HQ building was gone, replaced by a sleek, imposing structure of black plasteel and reinforced transparasteel, a testament to Ethel's dangerously elevated strategic importance. Or perhaps, Kalen thought grimly, a monument to 5 years of escalating desperation. The council chamber was a cavern of polished stone and holographic displays, the air thick with an almost palpable tension. Stern-faced human colonists in crisp administrative attire sat on one side of a massive, U-shaped table. Opposite them, a delegation of native Ethelians, their teal skin and silver hair striking against their more traditional, woven garments, sat with an air of stoic dignity. Their luminous eyes, however, held a spark of defiance that Kalen recognized all too well. Presiding over this volatile assembly was the new colonial governor, Eva Rostova, a woman in her late 50s with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that could chip Durasteel. She greeted Kalen with a firm, no-nonsense handshake. Captain Vance, thank you for your prompt arrival, Governor Rostova began, her voice a low, controlled contralto. The situation has deteriorated significantly since your last report from this planet. To put it mildly. So I've been briefed, Governor, Kalen replied, his gaze sweeping the room, assessing the players. The insurgents now control nearly half the planet, including the primary dilithium mining sectors in the northern wastes. They prefer to be called the Ethelian Liberation Front now, Captain, a cool, melodic voice interjected from the far end of the Ethelian delegation. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. Kalen turned, every instinct honed by decades of combat suddenly on high alert. His breath hitched. Standing there, addressing the council with an air of utter composure, was a woman who could only be described as breathtaking. Tall and willowy, she wore a form-fitting diplomatic uniform of deep indigo, subtly accented with intricate Ethelian silver scrollwork that seemed to shimmer in the ambient light. Her once wild silver hair was now artfully braided, swept back to reveal high cheekbones and a delicately pointed chin. Her teal skin seemed to glow with an inner luminescence. And her eyes, those same unforgettable nebula eyes, but now they held not childish fascination, but a keen, piercing intelligence, a hardened resolve, and something else, something unreadable, almost challenging. It took Kalen Vance, a man rarely caught off guard, a full 3 seconds to reconcile the image of the gawky, starstruck girl he had dismissed 5 years ago with the poised, formidable woman who now held the attention of the entire council. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips as her gaze met his. A smile that was part recognition, part something else. Triumph. "Captain Kalen Vance," she said, her voice resonating with a newfound authority that sent an unexpected shiver down his spine. "It has, indeed, been a very long time." The chamber was silent. Every eye was on them. Kalen could feel the unspoken questions hanging in the air. How did the newly arrived IPC hero know this Athelian representative? Governor Rostova, after a moment of surprise, cleared her throat. "Ah, Captain, it seems you are already acquainted with our chief negotiator to the Athelian Liberation Front." She gestured towards the woman. "This is Lyra. She has been instrumental in maintaining what little dialogue we still possess with the ALF leadership." Lyra. The name echoed in his mind, a phantom from a past he thought he'd left behind on this very planet. He could only manage a curt, "I see," his mind reeling, struggling to bridge the chasm of 5 years and the unbelievable transformation before him. The lovesick kid who had chased after him was now a key player in a planetary civil war. How in the void had that happened? The rest of the emergency briefing proceeded, a blur of strategic assessments, casualty reports, and increasingly desperate projections. But Kalen found his attention repeatedly, unwillingly, drawn back to Lyra. She spoke with eloquence and a startlingly comprehensive knowledge of the conflict, her arguments sharp, her insights unnervingly accurate. When she spoke, everyone listened, human and Athelian alike. Including him. What game was she playing? And what, precisely, had transpired on Ethel during those 5 years to forge such a woman from the girl he had so casually cast aside? The questions burned in his mind, far hotter than the political firestorm he'd just stepped into. The questions burned in Captain Kalen Vance's mind, far hotter than the political firestorm he'd just stepped into. As the other council members began to file out, a cacophony of hushed, anxious discussions trailing in their wake, Kalen remained rooted to the spot. His gaze was fixed on Lyra, who was now calmly gathering a set of slim datapads from the polished table. The girl who had once trailed him like a moonstruck calf now commanded the attention of governors and warlords. He had to know. He needed to understand. Some ghosts don't just haunt, they rewrite the entire war. And Lyra, it seemed, was a ghost who had spent 5 years mastering the art of cosmic calligraphy. He waited, a predator's patience settling over his military discipline, until the vast council chamber was empty save for the two of them and the lingering scent of ozone from the holographic displays. He approached her then, his boots echoing slightly on the stone floor. She didn't look up until he was a few feet away, then her nebula-colored eyes, cool and assessing, met his. No trace of the childish adoration he remembered. None at all. "You've changed," Kalen stated, the words an understatement so vast it felt absurd even as he uttered them. A ghost of a smile, enigmatic and fleeting, touched her lips. "People tend to do that over time, Captain Vance. Especially when faced with certain motivations." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "Diplomacy, however, seems to suit you less than your armor did. You look uncomfortable." He ignored the jibe, though it pricked. "It does, doesn't it?" he admitted, a grudging respect in his tone. This whole setup. You, a chief negotiator. He gestured vaguely at the opulent, yet sterile, room. Does it surprise you that I'm surprised? That the lovesick kid I knew grew up to be something more than anyone expected? Lyra's smile faded, replaced by an expression he couldn't quite decipher. Steel, yes, but beneath it, was that a flicker of old pain. Perhaps the kid was always more than you perceived, Captain. Perhaps she simply lacked the words, or the standing, to make you see. She straightened, her slender frame radiating an unexpected authority. I deserved your dismissal then, perhaps. I was young, naive. But I've grown up, Kalen Vance. The question now is whether you have. Whether you're a man whose word means something. The echo of his own careless, cutting words from 5 years past, come back when you've grown up, Lyra. Then we'll talk, slammed into him with the force of a phaser blast. He felt a flush creep up his neck. He, who prided himself on his honor, on the weight of his promises. He'd made a promise, hadn't he? A dismissive, half-hearted one, but a promise nonetheless. So I did, he acknowledged, his voice rougher than he intended. You said we'd talk. She took a step closer, and then another, until she was standing directly before him. Close enough that he could discern the subtle, exotic fragrance that clung to her, something like stardust and desert blooms. Close enough to see the intricate patterns within her nebula eyes. And here I am, she whispered, her breath warm against his cheek. An unexpected, unwelcome heat coiled low in his belly. This was no child. This was a woman, confident, intelligent, and unsettlingly, undeniably attractive. And dangerous. He could sense danger like a change in atmospheric pressure. Lyra seemed to sense his internal turmoil. She held his gaze for a beat longer, then took a graceful step back, breaking the spell. I have a debriefing with Governor Rostova shortly, she said, her tone once again coolly professional. But the situation on Ethel is far more complex than what was presented in that public forum. A delicate pause. Perhaps we could continue this conversation over dinner. There are matters of extreme sensitivity, information that hasn't been shared with the colonial administration. Information you need to know if you are to succeed where others have failed. Her eyes met his again, a silent challenge. My quarters. 2,000 hours. I prefer privacy for such discussions. Dinner. With her. Kalen Vance, who had faced down Kthar overlords in the Orion Nebula sieges without flinching, found himself oddly off balance. The logical, tactical part of his brain screamed warnings. This was irregular. Compromising. Yet. Yes, he heard himself say. That would be strategically advantageous. Her lips curved into that enigmatic smile again. Excellent, Captain. She brushed past him, the brief contact of her arm against his sending an electric jolt through his system. As she walked away, her movements fluid and assured, Kalen couldn't help but watch the graceful sway of her hips. What in the nine hells had he just agreed to? At precisely 2,000 hours, Kalen stood before the door to Lyra's diplomatic quarters, a bottle of surprisingly authentic Terran whiskey, a rare find on this side of the galaxy and a peace offering of sorts, in hand. He'd changed from his formal uniform into more casual, though still tactical, attire, black fatigue pants and a fitted gray shirt that did little to hide the physique honed by years of relentless campaigning. Old habits died hard. He scanned the corridor before keying the chime. The door slid open to reveal Lyra. She was breathtaking. She'd shed the severe diplomatic uniform for a simple yet elegant gown of deep Athelian blue, the fabric shimmering like captured twilight and complementing her luminous teal skin. Her silver hair fell loose around her shoulders, catching the light with every subtle movement. "Captain," she greeted him, a slight, almost unreadable smile playing on her lips. "Right on time." "Military precision," he replied, offering the bottle. "I thought you might appreciate a taste of old earth." Her smile widened fractionally as she accepted it. "I've developed quite an appreciation for many off-world cultures over the years, Captain. Please, come in." Her quarters were surprisingly spacious, a suite rather than a room, tastefully appointed with a blend of minimalist human design and intricate Athelian artistry. Large windows offered a panoramic view of the sprawling, fortified colony on one side, and the wild, untamed Athelian wilderness stretching towards the twin moons on the other. A small table was set for two, laden with what appeared to be a fusion of human and Athelian cuisine. "Impressive view," Kalen commented, moving to the window. From this height, he could see the expanded perimeter defenses, the scars of recent battles, the ever-present tension. "I find it grounding," Lyra said, coming to stand beside him, close but not touching. "To see both sides. The colony and the wilderness. It reminds me of what we're truly fighting for." "And what exactly is that, Lyra?" Kalen asked, turning to face her. "This balance you speak of." She turned to a small alcove, pouring 2 generous measures of the Terran whiskey into elegant crystal glasses. "A future where my people and yours can coexist, Captain. Without one dominating, or destroying, the other." She handed him a glass, their fingers brushing for the briefest of moments. That electric jolt again. Stronger this time. "To balance, then," he said, raising his glass. They clinked, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Lyra didn't flinch at the strong liquor, another small sign of how much the girl he remembered had vanished. As they moved to the table and began their meal, a surprisingly palatable mix of spicy Athelian root vegetables and Terran protein substitutes, the conversation flowed more easily than Kalen had anticipated. Lyra was disconcertingly well informed about galactic politics, military strategy, even some of the interstellar peacekeeping corps' more classified operations. She asked insightful questions about his missions since they'd last met, her knowledge specific and unnerving. "You've been keeping tabs on me," he observed, after she referenced a particularly brutal covert action during the Procyon V affair, details of which were supposedly sealed at the highest levels. How could she possibly know about that? Lyra's smile was enigmatic, a slow curve of her lips that made the hairs on his neck prickle. "Let's just say, Captain, I made it my business to learn everything I could about the man who told me to grow up." She took a delicate sip of whiskey, her nebula eyes holding his. "And did you like what you learned?" He found himself asking, against his better judgment. "I found it educational," she replied, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Your reputation as a tactical genius, a ruthless but effective commander, is well deserved. The Procyon V affair, despite its complexities, was particularly impressive from a strategic standpoint." Kalen studied her face, trying to pierce the diplomatic mask, the carefully constructed poise. Enough was enough. "All right, Lyra. Enough small talk. You didn't invite me to your private quarters to discuss my service record or admire your taste in Terran spirits. What's the real reason I'm here?" Her expression sobered instantly, the playful enigmatic light in her eyes extinguished, replaced by a chilling gravity. "No, Captain, I didn't." She set down her glass, her slender fingers tracing its rim. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper, though the room was undoubtedly secure. What I am about to tell you is not known to Governor Rostova, nor to anyone else in the colonial administration, save for a select few within my own network. Kalen's instincts, honed on 100 battlefields, screamed to attention. He leaned forward, mirroring her intensity. "I'm listening." "The Athelian Liberation Front," she began, her voice low and urgent, "is not what it appears to be. The insurgency, it started as a legitimate movement, a desperate cry from my people for autonomy, for respect, for an end to the exploitation of our world's resources. But it has been co-opted, twisted, by something far older, far more insidious." "What kind of dangerous are we talking about, Lyra?" He pressed, his hand instinctively moving towards where his sidearm would normally be. Her eyes, dark and shadowed now, held his. "The kind that involves off-world shadow brokers, the Xylos Syndicate, to be precise, funneling military-grade weaponry onto Ethel. And worse. Kthar hegemony military advisors." Kalen swore under his breath, a cold dread seeping into his bones. The Xylos Syndicate was a notorious criminal organization, their tentacles reaching into every dirty war and illegal enterprise across the Outer Rim. And the Kthar. He had personal, bloody history with the Kthar. If they were involved, this was no longer a simple colonial uprising. This was something else entirely. Something that smelled like a sector-wide conflagration waiting for a spark. "Someone wants Ethel destabilized," she continued, her voice barely audible. "And they are using my people's legitimate grievances, our desperation, to achieve their own dark ends." "How do you know this?" Kalen demanded, his mind racing. "What's your source?" Lyra reached for a small, intricately carved data crystal that lay beside her plate. It was made of some organic, obsidian-like Athelian material, etched with glowing teal glyphs that seemed to shift and writhe with an inner light. It wasn't standard tech, it felt older. More alive. As her fingers brushed its surface, it pulsed with a faint, almost inaudible hum. "Because, Captain Vance," she said, her voice regaining its calm, chilling composure, "for the past 3 standard years, I have been working as a double agent." Kalen sat back, stunned into silence, the half-eaten meal forgotten, the whiskey suddenly tasteless. "A double agent? This woman, this girl. Governor Rostova believes I am merely a skilled negotiator, a bridge to the moderate factions within the ALF," Lyra continued, her eyes never leaving his. "The more radical elements of the ALF leadership, those increasingly taking orders from their new Kthar friends, believe I am sympathetic to their cause, a patriot willing to do whatever it takes. In reality, Captain, I have been gathering intelligence, walking a razor's edge, for the Stellar Intelligence Directorate." He stared at her, reassessing everything he thought he knew, everything he'd just seen and heard. The transformation was more than skin deep. It was absolute. "That's a dangerous game you're playing, Lyra. A deadly one." A flicker of something he couldn't name, pride, pain, crossed her face. "I learn from the best, Captain," she said softly, and for a moment, he saw a ghost of the earnest, 17-cycle-old girl in her eyes. "You showed me, all those years ago, that sometimes you have to take extraordinary risks for what you believe in. For the people you care about." "I don't recall teaching you to become a spy," he said dryly, though the words lacked their usual bite. "You taught me more than you realize, Kalen Vance." Her gaze was intense, unwavering, a silent testament to the path she had chosen. "Those few days you were here, your dismissal, your challenge, they changed the course of my life." The admission hummed between them, heavy with unspoken history, with years of secrets and scars. Kalen cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden stillness. So, he said, his voice carefully neutral, why tell me all this now, Lyra? Why trust me with information that could get you killed? Her eyes locked onto his, a new urgency dawning within their nebula depths. Because I've discovered something, Captain. Something critical. Something that changes everything. She gestured towards the humming data crystal. The Kthar aren't just advising, they're building. And whatever it is, it's hidden deep in the northern wastes. I have to find out what it is. And I can't do it alone. Her eyes locked onto his, a new urgency dawning within their nebula depths. Because I've discovered something, Captain. Something critical. Something that changes everything. She gestured towards the humming data crystal, its teal glyphs pulsing with an almost sentient light. The Kthar aren't just advising, they're building. And whatever it is, it's hidden deep in the northern wastes. I have to find out what it is. And I can't do it alone. Kalen Vance stared at the intricate Athelian artifact, then back at Lyra. Her words, each one a carefully placed explosive charge, detonated in the stunned silence of her quarters. Infiltrate a Kthar hegemony black site. With her. Was she insane? Lyra, he began, his voice a low growl, what you're suggesting, this isn't a reconnaissance mission. That's a suicide pact. A Kthar base, if your intelligence is accurate, will be fortified beyond anything you can imagine. It's not a two-person job. It's a full damn battalion job, maybe more. He could already picture the layers of defense, the ruthless Kthar warriors, the sheer impossibility of it.